We'll be starting off with a very interesting panel, which is essentially building an effective impact investing strategy for Indian high net worth individuals and family offices. This particular discussion will focus on how impact investing is an undiscovered opportunity for HNIs and family offices, as is reflected in ISC's own research report with Waterfield Advisors on this subject matter that you can access on our website. This particular panel will be moderated by Mr. Anand Bhagwati, partner at the Bridgespan Group, one of the world's leading impact consulting firms. He will be joined by Mr. Amit Mehta, director of the L&B Group, a leading Indian diversified business conglomerate, Ms. Audrey Cillian, director of Artha Impact, the impact investing arm of Rianta Capital, Mr. Guneet Banga, executive director of the Caravel Group, a diversified conglomerate headquartered in Hong Kong, and Ms. Leena Dandigar, the founder and CEO of the Raintree Family Group, an impact-oriented Indian single-family office. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today, and I would now like to hand it over to Amit to begin the discussion.
It's an amazing group of people here with interesting and diverse points of view. So, hopefully it'll be exciting, but then hopefully we'll have time for Q&A. Don't spare them. That's my only. So wake up post lunch through that. I'm going to start right in with this, question on why do you do what you do on impact investing, and a no holds barred answer to strip away all the jargon, strip away all the what people want to hear. But why do we actually do this? Why are we sitting in this Delhi heat discussing this topic? And I'd love for Guneet, with your apologies to you, I'd love for you to start, but you can popcorn it to anyone else after that. But love to hear your thoughts and talk a little bit about, how did you start and what's the role your family, if any, play in this? And again, take it in any direction there.
Okay, I guess thanks for putting me on the spot. I guess sending an email 24 hours ago saying, I don't like the way you're structuring this. This is my punishment. So, jokes aside, I think to address your first point, why I do what I do, and then I'll give the history after that. It's because it's about meaning, it's about a fiduciary responsibility, not just to the family, but to the population of the world, the planet, and our future. I think we who sit up here are fortunate enough, better if you can hear me, to have been given access to resources, connections, and the ability to drive a new world. I think we've all read enough around the space of climate change, and that's sort of my biggest focus, that we need to destroy the old and rebuild the new if the human race is to survive in any recognizable form that we have today. Why do I do it? Because it motivates me, it terrifies me. I'm always learning from peers, from the younger generation, from people who've been doing this since the 70s and 80s when it wasn't hot and sexy. I mean, the jargon is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. It's, am I trying to make the world a better place, and am I trying to be a better person by doing so? So it's do good, be good. That's as simple as I can make it, but within that there's a lot of nuance, right? And the family, traditionally my father made his, he had success in shipping, mining, India and China in the 1980s and 90s. So basically one of the largest culprits of, one of the largest reasons why we are where we are today, right? They didn't know what the effect would be back then. They did the best they could, but I feel a sense of obligation to, if not erase what's done, but to try and mitigate and correct what was done, and to use the resources and what we've built from basically raping and pillaging the planet to saving it and creating a new way of life for everyone. It's cliched, I know, but at the end of the day, we're trying to save the planet, right? Trying to save the world, trying to save the human race. Because if we don't succeed in some degree in around the 1.5 to 2 degree temperature increase, then just look at the global maps, it changes, right? Look at what's happened in Pakistan in the last 3 weeks, where 30% is underwater. It's more of that. So I do this because I want to. I think we all have to. Everyone has to part play, and we need to collaborate more. And no idea is too stupid to play out. I just think being very fixed in our thinking will prevent us from finding solutions and really accelerating, I guess, the program of change towards sustainable living, producing, basically changing the way I live, you live, we all live. We have to do it, and I'm a small part of that, but I'm proud to be a part of that. So that's what gets me up in the morning, and that's why I do what I do. I mean, simple, complicated, but honest. No jargon, returns versus impact versus this and that and greenwashing. Forget it. It's irrelevant. Anybody? No? I'm gonna do. She responded to my email.
I did, so the punishment continues. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Audrey, and I work for Artha Impact, which is an initiative of Rianta Capital. Rianta Capital is essentially a dedicated advisor to one family. And so why am I here? I get to work for people who I respect immensely and whose value system fundamentally resonates with my own. And I had the opportunity to step into this not coming from PE, not coming from VC, coming from the development sector, coming from an academia. Lord help us. And so it was the opportunity for learning and for coming in with kind of a license to ask stupid questions. Well, why are we structuring that way? And why should we do our investment appraisal process this way? Why can't we share that with other people? I've had many seasoned investment professionals laugh at me and talk about, well, why would you share due diligence or pipeline? And I have had the immense joy of being able to learn about these mission-driven entrepreneurs. I mean, we're here in service of the entrepreneurs who are taking the big risks, going against the wishes of their families, trying to solve massive social problems that from the investor side of the table, we're just observing. We're the observers. We're trying to facilitate. And so the joy of being able to find a few and understand how we can actually inject little bits of energy, positive energy in what they're doing, it's addictive once you begin. I've been doing this for 16 years, and people see me at these conferences. A few that I've known for 18 years, they're like, "You're still here." I'm like, yeah, I'm still here. It's because once I think you're able to dedicate your work and your efforts to something that truly is about making things better, or at least we think, we hope, we try. We don't all see the full system design and understand all the reinforcing and balancing loops and the consequences of everything that we're doing. But our hope is that this is a shift in capitalism. It's a shift. It's not about the trade-offs, and I hope we don't get into the trade-off conversation between impact and financial return. No, there's so much high-quality entrepreneurship in this country. We are way past the trade-off. You just have to find the right business and hope that we can understand it, and you have to have enough money, or you have to galvanize enough money. And whichever way that happens, in whatever order, it's a totally new model where we don't have to behave like sharks. And so the opportunity to stay with, you can't do this and then be like, oh, I'm done, I'm going to go to VC now. I'm going to go and, behave like, I'm not going to say the word. I'm not going to behave badly. I'm going to behave as ethically as I can, because I have this immense privilege to deliver a set of workflows with a set of values that represents in my case, the family that I work for. So that's my answer. Over to you.
So thanks, Audrey, and do add me to your mailing list of deal flow and diligence. And thanks, Guneet. I think you make me feel better. I think a generation, so again, I represent a 100-year-old family in business, and hearing what a generation before did over the last 3-4 decades at your end, while we've also not been in the very positive businesses, but I think we've done a little bit in trying to do less damage so we are into textile manufacturing for the last 82 years. We are into tea plantations, so our group is almost 100 years old. We are into renewable energy. Our tea factories have been running on renewable energy for the last 30 odd years, while it is very savvy to today for large companies to come out and say that by 2025 we will be on 100% renewable energy. So we used to hold a pulp and paper company also, and the raw material there had to be wood, and we were planting close to 115 million trees a year without owning a single inch of land. So this was a social farm forestry program that we embarked upon over the last 3 decades. So for us, this has been a way of life, thankfully, I think, and the evidence is, as you said, impacts versus this thing. We've been surviving for the last 100 years. We've not tried to cut corners, but I think do our little bit on a positive side, which can sort of reduce the damage, because unfortunately pulp and paper used to be made only by wood. So you couldn't do away with that, but I think we were also creating enough supply. And even in the textile mill, for example, we put up captive solar plant within the factory. We've been utilizing or we put up capex for RO and ETP when it was not mandated by the Pollution Control Board also. So these small things, I think, is evidence that you can still make money and do the right thing also. So for us, I think instead of jargonizing it, I thought it's better not self-promotion, but trying to give examples that what we've been following over the last 3-4 decades, and we've been successful. Returns have not been less. I think it just gets delayed, but you do get the returns from there. So over to Leena.
Thank you. I think much has been said before I came in. Our story is a little bit different. I come from a family business, which most Indians know, the Camlin brand, and Camel and Camlin, very popular. At some point, we rationalized our shareholding. It was a large family, and my children and I, we stepped out. But it's a very strong legacy of goodwill, of quality. You all know when you talk about Camlin what it stands for, right? And we felt it was our moral responsibility, to take our forefathers' work ahead in a new way, define ourselves in a new way, not losing the values that we come from. We've always been sustainable. We've always been a very socialist business house, if I can call it that, very, very inclusive. And I wanted to take that forward. So when my family sat down together, my family is me and 2 kids in their 20s, 4 or 5 years ago, early 20s, and said, we have now, whatever we owned was an investable amount. And what do we want to do? And the first thing we said is we want to give back. We have more than we need. And then came the question of how do you come to what do you want to do with somebody who's 21 and 24? Because every 5 years there are new people. I felt that for us, being able to define a cause and a purpose which we could stay on for decades with patience was very important, because if we don't do it, who will? We have other donors, funders, investors who have shorter timelines, but we don't have those pressures. And so we kind of had facilitated chats between us, saying what do we do? And the 3 of us came up with 3 different things. My daughter is a big animal lover. She loves the forests, the jungles, and she talked about preserving natural reserves, creating corridors for wildlife movement, man-animal conflict, and that bunch of interrelated issues. My son is a big thinker. He talked about carbon sequestration. He talked about clean tech. He talked about planting 1 billion trees. And I, having lost my day job, was thinking of moving into the development sector with 50-60% of my time. So I had done a very intense survey of rural causes because I felt my contribution would be larger there. And very quickly came to realize that the lives of people, farming communities, tribal communities, and everybody out of our cities is very, very closely connected to the quality of the soil, the quality of ecosystem services, the weather patterns, and all of that. And it's not just an environmental and output problem that farming incomes and rural incomes are falling, but it's also a social problem because there is mass migration happening. due to a lack of incomes in rural areas, and which means that society as we knew it 30 years ago, 40 years ago does not exist in India anymore. Every young person worth his salt leaves, and villages are bare, and they're getting, literally ghost towns. So coming from this discussion, sorry, I'm taking a bit more time than I think Anand allowed me, but we realized we all want to work on climate in our own way, and quickly came to the conclusion that we need to use every available method of creating impact as a family. So we are impact investors, but we are also philanthropists, and we are open to every legal means to do impact all the way in between these two ends. We have a philanthropic arm as well, in which we practice and try and implement what we preach, and we running a pilot program in the foundation that we run, but we are also impact investors. Climate, environment is a key area for us. So some of the bottom of the pyramid questions don't apply because we are very, very climate and clean tech kind of focused. So that's where we came about. But we also took one big decision, which I think I need to give credit to my children. We decided to carve out 30% of our entire portfolio to clean investing, which would be ESG compliant and impact. And we have our own internal ESG checklist and a negative list and sectors we like. And that's a very big commitment for children in their 20s to take. I think probably it's one of my big successes as a parent that I was able to bring this conversation, make this conversation happen, bring consensus, and stay at it for 4 or 5 years now. And I don't think we've had a moment's doubt on what we want to do. And I feel very, very capable of staying on it for the next 20, 30 years. So that 30% of our entire capital is dedicated to impact investing, but also 20% of our annual incomes go into philanthropy. And so that is a very big impact to make. One of my children works in the social sector, and her whole life and her every working hour is also a commitment. I work in the social sector at least 50% of my time, and I think like they all said, there are no jargons in our family. We are very climate focused, and we use every legal means available to us in all combinations possible to get to what we want to do. So that's our story, and back to you, Anand.
Thanks, Leena. And one thing which you said, which just struck me, was you think in 30-year horizons.
Yeah.
And that is literally, families are literally the only group of people who can think like that, right? And many of these issues, thinking less than that zone is meaningless. I'm going to start with you, Leena, and shift it a little bit about the portfolio selection. And you talked a little bit about it, so maybe you can build off what you started. There's a wide horizon. There are different sectors. You can think of different geographies. There could be different stakeholder groups. In fact, there are different inequities in India as well. Gender being one, but there are many others, tribals, others. How do you go about something like this? One, of course, you talked about the heart. You align that gives the energy. Puneet spoke about that eloquently. Now, when it comes to actually the decisions of the portfolio, what do you look for and what do you strongly not look for as it comes to making investments, specifically in the case of impact investing? And talk a little bit about how did you get to that set of decisions? And I'm going to then request the rest to also speak about that and speak a little bit about these 3 dimensions: the sector, the geography, and if any stakeholder groups that are you over-index on.
All right. Okay. So far as geography goes, we are India focused. We earned in rupees, we spend in rupees. We don't have international entities, so this is it. This is our Janma Bhumi and Karma Bhumi, and here we are. It's early days for us. So far as sector goes, we do have a standard ESG list, and we've added to it. Again, coming from a very climate point of view, so factory farming, trawler fishing, bunch of things, anything which will destroy cultural heritage, architectural heritage, those kind of things we do have in our negative list, and we won't touch those no matter what. Now, after that also there is a big sector list left, right? Personally, I am a big fan of agriculture. However, in India, because we're India focused, there isn't that much scale yet in agriculture. One point to note about our investment philosophy is that we look at growth stage or mature businesses. Reason being, like I said, we are an invested portfolio. We don't have a running business which gives us income year in, year out. This is what it is. And in our early years, if we do the kind of speculative investing that venture does, that 2 out of 10 will succeed, then capital protection is a big question mark. I want to give our impact portfolio a very solid base. And so capital protection is a very important number one top line for us. We are okay if we don't, if we get 2 or 3% less compared to market returns, but we definitely try our best to see that the business is solid, the business model is solid, the entrepreneur is solid, there is a good team in place, there are adequate moats around, and normal sensible business decisions taken. So that is very important to us, and in that sense we are positioned quite differently from most of the impact investing universe. Having said that, this is a requirement that our portfolio has, that for the first 5 or 7 years we create a very solid, stable portfolio, and that's what we are doing regardless of the pressures around us. So many of the sectors that we look at are again always climate focused. So we have a clean energy company, we look at green chemicals, green buildings, any bridging technologies, manufacturing 4.0, which improves on processes, reduces wastages. So I feel that you can't go from where we are today to completely sustainable overnight. And there are many bridging technologies which are coming in rapidly, which we need to embrace, and some investors need to invest in and get bigger, because that is one step in our journey. So that's where we are positioned. I think I answered all three, so I'm going to hand it over to Amit now.
Thank you, Reena. So I think for us, investments is broken up into 2 parts. One is investments that we do inwards in our own businesses. So for example, the choice of businesses that we filter while getting into a new line has to be something which is impactful, positive, nothing negative over there. For example, we are into renewable energy, which we started over the last 7-8 years. We've created 2 parts there. One is 150 odd megawatt IPP portfolio for ourselves in solar and wind, and second, an EPC business in solar alone. So this is one we've done. Second, we also ventured into agriculture, which are with our experience in the pulp and paper business. But as Reena rightly said, in India, agriculture is not very scalable. So we ventured into Africa, where we've got a plot of 10 square miles of land, a single patch of land, and there we've chosen to do it a little differently. We've not tried to do the large scale mechanized farming by putting lots of fertilizer. We've chosen to do something called pure and responsible farming. So in simplicity words, I think 2 things: pure, the food that we get out of it has to be very, very pure. It has to be not just organic, but beyond it. And responsible, that the entire farming operations have to be done very responsibly. So we're trying to create a forest type environment instead of a monocropping, and balance the ecology and diversity over there, and also grow food. So we're not trying to chase yield per hectare, but focusing on the right way, which is good for the soil, good for the overall environment, and getting the right quality food out of it. So it's quite ambitious for this size of a project, but I think that's where we are putting our money where our mouth is. So the first filter is just as these 2 examples, and I don't want to get into more details on that. So first part is the places where we make our own investments and where we are the operating guys on the. So there the negative place for us is, for example, meat and poultry. We will not touch that, come with me. The second thing is where we are making investments outside. So whether it is in funds or whether it is in direct companies. So while we are not very avid, just because we are a family office, we don't believe in writing checks in 20-30 companies over a year or 2 and trying to make investments all across. We've done structured debt, we've got into certain companies which are on the. So anything which we feel is not right, we will absolutely, we don't have a very hard and fast ESG checklist in the sense that it has to tick the box and we do it. But I think you have to see the opportunity that the founder is bringing and the genuineness with which the founder is approaching it. A lot of times you come with great presentations where they are talking about as if they're just changing the planet all for them, but the idea is just more commercial than actually wanting to do it. So I think we try to see through such things, and last part I would like to add there, we wear 3 hats over there also. One is the philanthropy hat, where certain things which are good but may not be the best way to done on a commercial scale. There we will do a CSR or other through our charitable trust. We will dedicate money over there and not expect any returns out of it. Let the community at large get the benefit. The second is blended, where you have a mix of both, where some part of it can be viable, but it needs some sort of a sugar cube, where some part of it needs to be like a grant. So we'll do blended finance, and the other part, we are not pretentious. We want solid returns, and we don't feel there is a trade-off that needs to be done. In fact, only thing that changes is that probably you might not make money in the immediate 2 years, but over a 5, 7, 10 years, the wait could be longer, but the catch-up IRR does happen. So I think that's our philosophy around the 3 buckets that we also do. So, Puneet, over to you.
Thanks, guys. I guess, yeah, we are very similar in kind of, amalgam of kind of both what both you both do. We have an operating businesses, which, as you mentioned, will continue to run because you can't replace all energy into renewable energy overnight. So China, India kind of continue to need coal. Okay, we are involved in that. We have a responsibility to be the least bad alternative, right? So minimizing harm in our operating businesses as much as we can. Also investing actively in new technologies within our existing operating businesses. So, we own and operate 700 vessels, which carry about 5% of global trade, right? Massive source of carbon emissions, but you're not going to replace 90,000 ships overnight. That's going to take decades, right? So we're investing actively in biofuels and nuclear technology, in various other initiatives alongside other industry players to because it's not going to be a one solution to solve it, right? It's too big an industry, a sector. There's too many different regulations by country. So we are, it's a process of trying things and seeing what works today. What can we do in the short term? What can we do in the medium term? And what's a longer term fix for the entire sector? We also have a charitable foundation, which is absolutely distinct from the ESG sustainability impact investing arm, which I'm responsible for. And then we have a separate asset management business, which doesn't touch the ESG side other than basic screening, and the operating businesses, which I touched on. So within the sort of new entity that's been set up, we've also committed to between 25 and 30% of our total assets to be deployed into impact investing by 2025. So that's a lot of money you're going to deploy in the next couple of years. Beyond that, let's see, right? I think once, as you mentioned, and you mentioned this long-termism, I think is a term that I use because it defines what I base all my investments on. I'm not going to make a return tomorrow. I'm not in it to make a quick buck and get out. I'm in it to invest over 5, 10, 15, 20 years because, some of these problems are going to have multiple iterations until we get to a solution that is as beneficial to whatever problem is trying to be solved as it can be, right? So we've got, 40 years till 2050, give or take. There'll probably be multiple failures amongst what we think works today. And it's about being flexible and open-minded that, okay, just because I've invested in green methanol today, for example, and for ships and aviation fuel, doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to last for the next 35, 40 years. So sector-wise, we are pretty much climate-focused, driven by SDG 7 and 13 as a general kind of guideline. It's not specific because, again, we get into jargon, which I abhor. And, the metrics that go alongside that with the GIN, IRIS plus, like trying to calculate those makes me blow my brains out. So I have smarter people than me do that. But, you have to measure what you're doing, and I understand that, jokes aside, right? But so climate tech, that's all decarbonization, clean energy, mobility, EVs, China, India in a big way. Electric ships actually is something we're looking into. Unmanned, which is terrifying to think of, 100,000 ton tanker with no people on it, trying to sailing the oceans. But fortunately or unfortunately, my father is getting older, and we're going through a sort of transition, succession planning, and restructuring of the whole business. So have a trust with the corpus that's going to be set aside for the future, and then the operating businesses, which will continue to fund the philanthropic foundation and pay dividends into the family for living expenses, and then fund the investment businesses. So, over the next, between now and 2030, hoping to invest somewhere between $750 to $1 billion in clean tech. That's assuming, I don't make any money on any investment. But yeah, it's something you touched on, right? I know when I don't want to invest in something. It's like a feeling in my gut. And that comes just from meeting hundreds of thousands of people that, like, at least for me, I've learned to follow that instinct. And then something that's attractive, you do a little more work, but it comes down to the founder, the passion, and is this actually achievable? Because, I looked at an asteroid mining business the other day, right? I'm like, how the heck are we going to get nickel and lithium from an asteroid down to Earth in a cost-effective way, right? Is it worth spending time on and impactful enough? So, you see all sorts of things, which is cool on one side, but on the other side, you've got to manage what's practical, what's going to make an impact today, what's 5 years, what's 10 years, what's 15 years. And I think if we all sit here 5 years from now, this conversation is very different.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, what excites me.
Fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
And how much of that billion is coming to India?
I'm actually setting up, I've got the Hong Kong office set up, moving it to Singapore because of diversification outside China. So it'll be Singapore, setting up an India office starting in January, looking to hire. If anybody knows quality people, please speak to me, because I haven't been here in 9 years. But look, we've got rupees from our investment in ICA, which we can't take offshore. So that's $1 billion. It's not going anywhere. So split it 50-50 between me and my brother, and there you go. Some idea, right? Not all at once, then all we do it. Obviously, there's other things that we may want to do, but I think India is the biggest opportunity for the next decade, 2 decades, and it's very quickly going to overtake China in terms of impact investing, ESG, investor interest, because China's becoming more inward-looking. Xi Jinping is consolidating power. It's a more and more investor-unfriendly environment if you're a foreigner. So, India has it all. We just need to execute on it. I am going back, but then I'm moving to Singapore by the end of the year. So, when the tanks roll in, I'm up there.
Or to bring in your perspective, also given that, like the other three, you are, representing family, but, what perspectives do you have when you do a portfolio?
Yes. So our case is quite different. So I represent a diasporan Indian family whose wealth was made in the retail business, in the garment trade, and but the objectives of the impact portfolio, which has always only been focused entirely on India, have been to essentially contribute to human well-being outcomes and increase incomes for people and give opportunities and provide access to services and products that were heretofore unavailable. A couple of years ago, quite randomly, I got to step out of my element and go to an Indigenous business conference, an Aboriginal conference in Halifax, Canada. I didn't even know that planes stop in Halifax. I thought you just fly over Halifax. So we got off at this place and got to this conference, and this massive conference hall was kicked off. The event was kicked off with prayers led by the elders, the tribal elders of the Mi'kmaq Nation. It was the First Nations of Atlantic Canada convening. And the substance of the words in those prayers, as I understood them, refer to a very standard prayer that immediately reveres the 7 generations before them and the 7 generations to come. And it was such a simple thing, but it is such a mindset, it is such a part of the DNA that opportunity to function in this market and to talk about things like investment and finance with the idea that you have the luxury to think ahead and to not sit here and be like, okay, 36 months from now we expect a 25% IRR. No, it's not that you don't want to be rigorous. That does not mean that you're undermining the rigor or the exercise of deployment of capital. But in the context, to come back to the point, in the context of our portfolio, we're tracking for and aiming for an 8% IRR. We'd be happy with an 8% IRR. We can wait 5, 7, a couple of our entrepreneurs might be in the room, 10 years. We've been engaged and we're patiently waiting and hoping to support these models as they tip into sustainability. It doesn't happen overnight. And so many of these mission-driven entrepreneurs some of them are coming from the nonprofit sector and coming at it with, it's got to come with a mindset shift. So we have the luxury as a family office, I think many family offices may, to wait, to support. And so it's a mix. In terms of sector focus, we've been involved in agriculture and then realized that small tickets in agriculture don't work so well. Took us a while to realize that. Energy, last mile services, water, potable water provision, waste management, sanitation. Our portfolio today is comprised of 26 companies. We've had about 6 exits, for better or worse. It's very challenging, but our goal is to co-invest with others, with peers, to syndicate as frequently as possible. Now we have a project coming up with small tea growers in the south. We have quite a mix, so we're not specialist investors per se, but we've had the opportunity to learn, and I'll close with that. The learning from our local partners. When you speak of surpassing China, and I've thought this from the beginning. I'm coming at this with a bit of an American lens that mirrors my accent. I actually think the levels of social innovation, creativity, mission-driven entrepreneurship have been higher here from the get-go. This is the most highly concentrated ecosystem of social innovation in the world, and I don't think that can be called into question. And so it's all the more an opportunity for folks like us to learn and to really take risk as well, because we're some of the few that can take risk, and that doesn't happen enough. So I'll close with that.
Absolutely agree with you. I just wanted to highlight one thing, right? China is in a population decline, as everyone knows. Their middle class is decreasing rapidly. They're not going to have enough people to employ and fill their workforce in probably 10, 15 years. India, we have 450 to 500 million people between the age of 25 and 40. That's going to drive consumer trends, which is going to drive industry. And these guys are all tech savvy, they're sustainability savvy, and they want better for themselves than they've had. So that is what's going to drive not just this social revolution and focus on social returns, environmental returns in India, but I think that's what people will end up being forced to adopt around the region, right? There's a massive group of people that are wanting better, doing better, and will continue to do so. So that's why India is number one for us, at least for me.
I think the group is woken up post lunch, the audience, and I'm going to ask one rapid fire now, and after that, really open it up to the audience. So think of at least 2 questions and make the questions tough ones. Like I will just 10 minutes to go. So there you have it. I'm bad at timekeeping. So in your full journey, doesn't matter whether in India or other places or but full journey, what has been the one example of either the greatest learning? It could be like a oh gosh learning or whatever, or the greatest joy personal joy in your journey of investments. And in why this question is what the one thing I've learned, and what I think hopefully you have also picked up, is energy is at the very center of all of this. Everything else is important, not discounting at all. And energy comes from either learning, like I think you just said, or joy. And sometimes you were mentioning, right? It's joy with kids, maybe your kids' at some point. So no particular order, anyone can start. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have a little story to recount. When we were figuring out what to do together as a family, my son was 21 or 22, and he said to me, I've been observing weather patterns, from when I was maybe 13, 14, 15. That's when he kind of knew enough to understand weather around him. And he said, I'm going to live 80 or 90 more years, because their generation is going to live to 90 and 100 easily. He said, in the last 7 or 8 years I've been observing weather, I see no pattern. And he says, it terrifies me to think that my planet cannot support me. It terrifies me to think that my home, I'm near the sea in Mumbai, could get flooded. It terrifies me to think that it will be, he feels very hot. We call him Garmendra because he's always feeling garam. It says it terrifies me to think how hot it will be and I'll have no escape. And that for me was a aha moment, because, for us, I've lived a large part of my life. But my children have 70, 80, 90 years to go, and we are looking at very dire predictions just 20, 30 years down the line so far as climate goes. All of us parents, all of us my age, pretty much everything we do is for our children, right, and our grandchildren. And look at how terrifying that statement was for a 21-year-old. He told me one day, I cannot plan my career. Don't know whether I can live in this city, in Mumbai, how long I can live. I cannot plan anything because I don't know where this planet is going to take us. Of course, he's a very deep thinker. And so he comes up with these mega thoughts at a very young age. But truth is, anybody who would care to think enough about these problems would think this way. It's a very terrifying world out there for anybody who's going to live longer than 30 years, right? And for me, I think that was a changing moment. And from then on, I think my family, me personally, as right now taking the large part of the decisions for my family, have not taken my eye off that target. That for the next 70, 90 years, Mr. Garmendra must stay cool enough to be able to enjoy his life, right? Because I owe it to him. And yeah, I'll pass it on to the rest of the panel, but that was my big moment.
So I think I'll be optimistic, and I think we should share something which energizes everyone. I think two things. One, I think on our social farm forestry, when we did about 115 million trees a year, so when you meet some of the farmers on ground who've actually, out of their small acreage of 6-8 acres also, they have dedicated 3-4 acres for a 5-year program, because it's a gestation period of 5 years, and they are also very happy with both the economic returns and seeing that with less operations they are able to make more money also. So that's one satisfying, because then you feel you've actually made some impact on the ground. Second, and more important, I think what gives us joy is, I think now, despite being a Marwadi group who is assumed not to think anything but money and returns, so I think the entire culture in our group has been that people are, it's a way of life, as I started off in saying, that it's not today or something we are waking up and doing. I think we are learning and accelerating, but I think over the last few decades, we've practiced, and now almost everyone in the group is equally bought into it and enthusiastic. And as I say sort of jokingly, while it's turmeric latte today, but we've been having Haldi ka doodh for decades. And I think it's a good thing. Turmeric latte is a very helpful change because it's helping others also adopt. But I think that sort of gives us a lot of joy that everyone is now because each one of us has to contribute. It cannot be, you cannot expect one Tata group or one big philanthropist to come and do a climate change. I think we are doing a disservice by just calling it climate change. That's why it's got diluted, that it's some change that's happening and then it's okay, we'll sort of reconcile to the change. I think it's a bigger impact than just climate change, and I think that the seriousness of the issue probably is getting lost. I think that's what it is. Thank you.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. The seriousness is it's the future of humanity. right? That's it. Do we survive as a race or not? I mean, worst case scenario, right? And when you sit and think about that, it's terrifying for anybody. But what brings me joy and hope is seeing, one of my founders sitting here, young man, so passionate about what he wants to do. I get inspired watching him on a weekly basis. I get joy from his success because without people like him and others around in the room, and we wouldn't have a chance, right? Left to us, this is where we got to. Right, our thinking got us here. So let's give these guys a chance, and that's it. Like I said, it brings me huge joy to watch somebody that I've not even backed with money, but backed with advice or support in other ways, succeed in what they want to do and make a change. And it's tangible, right? It's small to start with, but you can see where it's going. And another thing that I think brings me, joy, but also fear is this need for collaboration and coordination, which we see in certain areas, but globally we are nowhere near coordinated enough, collaborative enough to get to where the UN says we need to be by 2050. And if anything, it's becoming more and more difficult given all the geopolitical tendencies. So forget countries, it's up to the individual, it's up to the consumer, it's up to the company. Otherwise, so you've got the hope and you've got the dead weight kind of holding us back. But it's trying to minimize that and maximize the energy and the inspiration and the passion that you get from watching people do what we can't do, but want to support.
Thank you. Audrey, no pressure. You got to say energy levels right up.
I'll be brief. I couldn't agree more with what you've just said. That's the big learning. I guess after having been to some of these conferences and understood how rich this ecosystem is of funders and funds and foundations and different vehicles, and yet no single one of us can actually move the needle ever, not even close. If all of us were on the same cap table, all of us incentivized to work together, we probably still would just about barely move the needle on one SDG, right? Maybe. So what are we doing? So what are we doing here, right? We're supposed to be here to find each other, to make connections. It's a one-off opportunity to meet people, and yet it's got to lie in the joy. Herein lies the joy. We get to meet with a couple of people who are our kindred spirits. We don't know each other yet, brothers and sisters, and you make a connection, and then you work together, and you figure some stuff out. And I think that's the only thing that makes it all worth it. And it's also in the spark that you see in the eyes of those the entrepreneurs, those who are driven by the mission. If we don't actually get to build those human relationships, and we've been so lucky, of all those that we've met, the vast majority have been who we thought they were. The vast majority. So I think the sector has a great advantage to it because of the mission at its DNA. So that's...
Can I have
Yeah.
half a minute? So I think in the spirit of collaboration, I'm going to request Bridgespan and whoever else can actually make it happen, who's in the audience, to put together a family office collaborative around climate-focused investing. Make it happen, Anand.
Why don't you already have it?
Why don't we?
That's a good point. Maybe we should meet after the session is over. Yes.
Take responsibility.
Yeah.
That's a great call to action. I'm going to come back to this. Just underline something before opening it up to the audience. Don't leave it to the governments. They by definition move slower, and maybe there's some logic to it, and they by definition move in a risk-averse manner. But this topic is neither going to work with too much slowness and too much risk aversion. And I think what you said is it's people to people, whether it's entrepreneur and funder, whether it's between the funders themselves, etc., which is needed, and the people are in the room. So in some level, one of the things which is interesting to me, as maybe the least knowledgeable about this topic, is why is collaboration not happening? And maybe it goes back to the topic you said, the term climate change. It's a very passive term. Like it's changing, oh gosh, and I'm a victim. Whereas maybe this is more about like, what is the action we need to take? And maybe some of that can emerge from this room. Hold that thought. We will come back to one Monday morning action from each one of them. But does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
We'll take one question.
Thank you. Rajiv from GPI. My question is threefold in a way. Not, I'm just questioning. See, there are three pieces to it because all are critical ones. One, you mentioned the piece of land bank. India has too much, in terms of broken up places and passage in West Africa. So how do you look at this? Because this is critical one, and there is enough land mass which is so-called barren in some ways, but the opportunity lies there. And which is so how do you look at this? Because this can be game changer. The second part is that the piece which you mentioned about there is not enough skills available on the ground, and we don't want it to be automated. Otherwise, we'll make it very different for a country like India, which will have its own sets of huge, problems. So how do you work that piece out as important as this? And the third piece is that so much what we produce goes waste. Whether lack of the rice processing or the lack of right warehousing or the lack of right logistics, which is happening, and you are experts, because your family's done it, you are doing it, and awesome jobs which you folks are doing. But how do you address the three critical factors which are risks also, but at the same time are pretty complex for a country which intends to be a food bowl of the world, in many ways?
Thank you. We can start
Yeah, so I think the first thing, yes, India has got fragmented land, and that's not changing because you can't expect a country of India's fabric, unlike China, to be doling out large tracts of lands to corporates or any large people. So that's not happening. But they are innovative models. It will be tough, difficult, but I think there is hope and they should happen. Where you'll have to have the small growers collaborate, and there can be a cooperative type model in Amul. So there are FPOs, etc. But unfortunately, the success factors there are not as great because there's a lot of contamination in the intent. So I think we have to remain hopeful, but that's a challenge, but also an opportunity to keep it short and simple. On the second part, I think barren land, yes, barren land is not just an opportunity from this perspective. It's an imperative requirement that you need to use the barren land, specifically at the coastal areas. If you don't grow forests and things, there's from a natural barrier, from a tsunami type thing, it's well proven. But again, as Anand mentioned, unfortunately, government has to take the lead there. Individuals, we cannot. We are happy to we approached one of the coastal governments once the tsunami hit 10 years back that we will take care of it, the plantations. You have to keep that natural barrier, otherwise you are very, very vulnerable from tsunami. But unfortunately, again, that's a bit dependent upon government and policy. But again, we have to remain hopeful, and I don't think we have to stop doing other things. But whenever that happens, and I hope and pray it happens sooner than later, I think that's a huge win-win for the local economy, for protection against such natural calamities. I think both ways it's only a win-win-win. It's just someone has to take action. Third part, agri-warehousing. Unfortunately, you've directed 3 questions where we first stand. So we also attempted to do agri-warehousing in the country while we have that business, but I think that has not evolved the way we wanted, because unfortunately the ecosystem there, the opportunity on food wastage, etc. is humongous. Not as humongous as we read in the newspapers, because we say 40% is wastage, etc. I don't believe in a country like India people will waste 40%. Yes, pilferage is a problem. So I think out of that 40, whether 30 is getting pilfered or 20 is a question mark, but I think a lot of it is getting pilfered. There again, the ecosystem has to evolve. The constituents or the players in that market, whether it is large agri players who are storing, for whose benefit is being stored, the banks who are funding these, they have to actually wake up and use technology, which 10 years back was not as easy to use, unlike today where costs have come down, solutions technology are there. So that is again a big opportunity that remains. We attempted it, we failed, but I think maybe the ecosystem sort of improves, and then we are happy to be, and I'm sure many others will come and participate. But that remains an opportunity. India is something where a copy paste cannot be done from West, because unlike the large silos, etc. in the Brazils and other places, that cannot be. So India has to have its own model, and you have to have just, I think my personal thing, the ecosystem gets a little improvised, and I'm sure many entrepreneurs will come in and solve this problem. So again, all these three are very, very large. opportunities you mentioned, yes, please.
Not for
Sorry.
the skill piece,
So skill, I think, is not a problem. Sorry, there I think we have enough skill. In fact, if you go to the grassroots and villages and all, you'll see enough opportunities from our grandmothers to our other people local. We in the cities are a little spoiled of wasting water and doing all that. Those guys really value the things. I feel that skill is actually also there, and it needs to be harnessed. So there are a lot of small individual people in their way of life. They are practicing things which are friendly towards Mother Nature and not like us who are sort of screwing up. So I have a different view on that, and I think I'm more positive there. So.
Touching on,
Very interesting time.
sorry, food waste. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. There's a massive opportunity there. It's a massive issue here in India. There's a couple of portfolio companies we have in Africa which are using food waste to produce, replace like bleach products. And there's one company which is essentially trying to become the sustainable DuPont of non-chemical chemicals, right? By using food waste and crop waste. So the technologies exist, the wherewithal exists, capital exists. It's a matter of getting it right in an Indian context. And that's actually something that I'm looking at to, I'm going to find somebody who I can buy millions of tons of waste from in order to do this. So if anybody knows, let me know. But there's a massive opportunity that I'm currently examining in terms of creating biofuels and other sort of products from food waste, crop waste, and municipal waste. And so the opportunities there, we just got to capture it.
Thank you. Great. I know there will be many more questions. I'm so sorry, but we'll have to wind now. But do connect with this group. Thank you so much, folks. And thank you, audience, for bearing with this.